thanks for coming on, man. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Montgomery, or where you grew up.
Well, I grew up down in South Alabama. I grew up down in a little town called Elba. Born and raised down there. Grew up, went to Troy University, then on to the University of Alabama to law school, and then into state politics, into state government.
So you was Bob James's legal advisor on his legal stand, right?
Yeah, my first job out of law school, I landed as the assistant legal advisor to the governor of Alabama, and learned so much from that job. I was just sort of thrown in. In fact, it's sort of funny. We got there the first day. We walked in the offices. Jim Folsom had just left, of course, the day before during inauguration. They took every piece of paper. They took every notepad, every pencil. We walked in. The office was completely bare. My boss turned to me and he said, "What do you think we ought to be doing?" And I said, "I have no idea. Maybe if we go sit at our desk, somebody will bring us something to do." And that's what we did. We went and sat at these desks with no papers on them, and they started bringing contracts and legal documents and things that needed to be read. And I don't think we ever had a clean desk again, but that's how it was. None of us knew anything about state government when we got there. Of course, Governor James had been governor before, but most of the folks that were in his administration were new to state government, and it's nothing like running a business. So it was a lot of learning on the job.
I met Governor James a couple of times. What was he like working with?
I love Governor James. He was very down to earth. He was sort of what you see is what you get. A lot of folks don't remember that in 1978, Governor James ran for governor. He's to this day the only person to ever be elected as a Democrat and a Republican. But when he got in that race in 78, nobody thought he could win. He was running against the three Bs, they called them: Bill Baxley, Jerry Beasley, and Albert Brewer. And those were all household names in Alabama politics at the time. He had decided to run because he owned a company called Diversified Products. They invented concrete-filled barbells. And people would come to apply for jobs, and they couldn't fill out the application. They couldn't read the application. So he decided to run for governor on an education platform. And he campaigned for governor on a yellow school bus all across the state. And he carried, if you go to the Capitol today and you look at his official portrait, he's holding this big, looks like a limb, and it's left over from the 78 campaign. And he would stand up and give a speech, and he would say, "Everybody says we don't have a chance. Everybody says we can't win. But this says different." He would hold up this big root-looking thing, and he would say, "It's the grassroots of Alabama. And on election day, you're going to hear from the grassroots." And he was right. He beat all the biggest names in Alabama politics. He came into office and really surprised a lot of people. There's a lot of austerity. You may remember he famously compared state government to a Waffle House and said that that's how you ought to run state government.
I remember that, which I remember. I was too young to remember, but I remember you part of the team that filed the leak front of the court brief. It's not
You're breaking up a little bit, Chris. I heard you ask about a friend of the court brief, but I couldn't understand the subject. I think I may have lost you.
We're back.
Hey, I'm here. Are you still there?
Yeah. I had to reconnect settings right there.
Okay. Just looking up your number, but I heard you ask about a friend of the court brief, but I couldn't understand what the topic was.
Okay, let me sure this is recording. No, yeah. When he did the friend of the court briefing for the I think it was during when Judge Moore's fight about the 10 Commandments didn't apply to the states. Were you a part of that?
I was. In fact, we were part of the legal team. We met. In fact, that's the first time I ever met Judge Moore. I called Judge Moore to offer. The governor offered to pay his legal bills when he was still a circuit judge, and the 10 Commandments monument in Montgomery was the second round of that fight. We were actually involved when he put he had made a hand carving that he had carved into wood with a wood burning kit on the wall in the Etowah County courtroom where he sat. And that was the first round, is the ACLU sued him over that. And Governor James intervened, paid the legal bills. And then when he got elected Chief Justice, we had round two where he put the monument in the rotunda of the Supreme Court. But I was there for both rounds.
So what's your take on that? I mean, because I always think it's a fascinating argument when I hear it. Because I know Governor James had a couple of big, I think it was Notre Dame's head of their law school, or he had a couple of big, jurists on there that signed off. So just wonder what your take on it was.
Well, it became ground zero of the religious liberty fight. And whether we were going to make case law about whether monuments that were much older than either of these two could be on public grounds, or whether, to me, the arguments always come down to whether government is allowed to be neutral or supportive of government, or must they be hostile to government? And there's a lot of folks who believe that government has to be hostile. And that's not what the Constitution says. In fact, the Constitution doesn't say that you have a right to be free from religion. It says religion has a right to be free from government interference. The government can't set up a church. Government can't choose one religion over another. But it doesn't say that it has the right. In fact, it forbids the government to squelch or interfere with religious liberty. And a lot of folks have taken a letter that Thomas Jefferson sent to the Danbury Baptist Association, where the separation of church and state actually began. Thomas Jefferson wrote and said that the wall of separation between church and state must be tall and impregnable. But he wasn't advocating what we've come to understand that to mean today. He was advocating that the wall has to be high to protect religion from government. And now they have flipped it around. And if you listen to most of the national media, you would walk away believing that the separation of church and state is in the Constitution. It's not. It was made up by an Alabamian. It was made up by Hugo Black, who was the first person to ever make a ruling that there was a separation of church and state. That's something the Supreme Court made up out of whole cloth. But the original idea finds itself in a letter Thomas Jefferson wrote. And in that letter, he was not advocating at all that you should have the sort of hostility towards religion that we see today. He was advocating just the opposite.
That's a good answer. Okay, so what if it was a judge that practiced Islam or Hindu? Would you still feel the same way regarding that?
Well, I think as a people of principle, we have to recognize that while the Constitution was written by Christian men, most of them wrote about the need for America to be a Christian nation. The Constitution doesn't single out any particular religion as having special rights and privileges. But we can't forget the Judeo-Christian foundations of the country. That is the context that the Constitution was written in. That's the context that the entire history of the United States has to be read against. But it does not say that if praying a Christian prayer, it's protected, and if you're not, that it's not protected. Now, a lot of people would like to get into that debate, but that misses the point. The point is that the Constitution protects the church and religion from government interfering with it. That's the reason that you can't legislate that a church provide abortion or pregnancy planning as a part of its health care program, because you have a right to have religious beliefs free and separate and apart from government interference.
That's a great answer. Okay, so you served with Governor James, and then Don Sigmund took office. Come back in with Governor Riley, then stuff more, and you take over. So you had some pretty big cases there. You sued the pharmaceutical companies, got a lot of money back for the state. What was that, like 79 companies you sued?
Well, we sued 76 of them for stealing.
76? Okay.
76 of them for stealing from the federal from Medicaid. To me, Medicaid is a sacred promise that the states made to the most vulnerable, whether it's children, whether it's folks that have disabilities, or whether it's senior citizens. They're guaranteed that the Medicaid program will get the lowest average wholesale price, and drug companies were manipulating that in a way that they were overcharging the state to the tune of tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. Wow. And a lot of my business-minded friends didn't like it when we sued them. But I'll be honest with you, you don't get a license to steal just because you're big or just because you have a lot of money. And I never was really in with the clique of Wall Street Republicans. I felt right at home with Walmart Republicans, but the Wall Street Republicans never really cared for me. I thought it was my job to pursue corruption wherever I found it, and nobody was too big or too powerful that they should be allowed to steal from the most vulnerable in our state. I sued them, and I'm proud of suing them.
I mean, I was reading over that again because I forgot about it. I was like, man, that's a lot of money he brought back in. I'm sorry, I should have touched on this just a second ago. During the 4 years, the interlopen period, what kind of law was you practicing then?
I went to work for the Attorney General's office.
Okay, yeah, that's right. I remember. I don't know why that slipped my mind. Okay, so then you, the Sex Trafficking Bill. I was reading about that. Or was it monitoring? I think.
Yeah. So when I became Attorney General, we set up something called the Family Protection Unit, and its job was to. When I became Attorney General, every agency enforced the law on its own, and we consolidated that and created a clearinghouse so that there was a centralized agency who was tasked with the job of protecting families, whether it was senior citizens or kids or anybody in between, whether it was child pornography, whatever it was. Well, it came to my attention, and my kids were little then, and it came to my attention that Alabama maintained a sex offender registry. And we would tell you that if you wanted to know if there were sex offenders, registered sex offenders, living nearby, you could go to a database, put in your zip code, and it would give you a list. What it didn't tell you is that the failure to register, the failure to keep your registration current, was a misdemeanor that nobody took the time to enforce. And so, in my mind, what we had really done was not to make families safer. We had made families at greater risk because parents had a false sense of security that if there was a sex offender nearby, they were going to be alerted to that. And it just wasn't true. So we proposed the toughest sex offender law in the country at the time. Florida previously had the toughest. We passed the toughest sex offender law. We made minimum mandatory sentences, no more good time for predators. We required registration and made it a felony if you didn't register or if you failed to keep your registration current. And we legislated for the adoption of what at that time was pretty cutting edge technology, which would have put a tracking device on sex offenders' ankles so that if they were released back into the community, we had the ability to link that tracking device to a victim. So if the tracking device came within a certain distance of the victim's phone, the victim would get a notification. So imagine this. Imagine that you were raped. The rapist gets out of jail, and you're both in the grocery store. Can you imagine a bigger nightmare than to come around the corner and bump into the person that raped you and not know they're there?
No.
Couldn't either. So the technology allowed us to do things we'd never done before. And there was a lot of resistance from district attorneys, frankly, from the governor, to passing that legislation. And the thing that changed a lot of their minds was that Bill O'Reilly had a Fox News program back then. Yeah. And he got on the attack about states that had deficient sex offender laws. And he singled Alabama out as having one of the worst sex offender laws in the country. And that was sort of the tipping point that brought everybody around. And we passed the bill, I think, with just one person voting against it in the Senate. And it's one of the things I'm proudest of. It made Alabama safe.
So now they sex offender think when they get out and release in the community, they have to wear a ankle bracelet or monitor.
No, but it can be imposed.
Oh, okay, it can be imposed. I got you.
You have to, and if they don't register, it's a felony, and they do have to serve day for day their sentence. If they get a 10-year sentence, they don't get any time off for good behavior.
Okay, I got you. So they don't, whatever the sentence is, they go for that. Okay, that is I like the idea of especially with the imposing the ankle bracelet on it. Okay,
hey,
so
Chris. So when we were trying to pass it, as I say, there was a lot of institutional opposition to it. You look at it now and say, who could be against that? But there were a lot of people against it. So I had this great idea to put on a tracking bracelet myself and wear it until they passed the bill. And so you could go to the Attorney General's website, and little pink footprints would be all over the state wherever I had been, so that you could understand the power of the technology. And I went over to Callaway Gardens to give a speech on a Friday night. They'd been really nice, and this was really before all the restrictions on people on what public officials could do and what they could accept. And so we went over. I took my wife, I took my kids, and we spent the weekend at Callaway Gardens. And I gave this speech on Friday night. The next morning, I got up, came walking out, and said to my kids, "What do y'all want to do?" And they all, "Oh, let's go to the pool, Dad." So I went, changed into my swimsuit, came walking into the den with my T-shirt and my swim trunks and my sex offender tracking device on my leg. And my wife said, "You can go take that off. We are not going to the pool with you looking like a fugitive." And I said, "Honey, you can't take it off. That's the whole point. But who is going to pay any attention?" We got to the pool. There were about a dozen families in the pool. Between the time we got out of the car and got inside the fence, every family got out and left the pool. And it really taught me the importance of that device as a warning instrument. That not only was it going to give us better control, that we would know if you went somewhere you shouldn't be. We could alert people if you got outside your protected zone, if you went somewhere you were prohibited from going, like to the victim's house. But also it would warn people there's a danger here, because what we know about predators is they don't prey one time. They prey and they prey again and again and again. And I'm very proud of the work we did. We still hold the record for the most severe sentence on a child pornographer in the history of Alabama. There's a guy in Walker County that had hundreds and hundreds of images of child pornography. And I went over and did the grand jury. And literally, this guy had hundreds of these things that he was using a computer next to his little girl's bed as the server to host a pornography ring. And I went and did the grand jury. And one of the people on the grand jury, I'll never forget it. We talked about how many pictures there were and how horrible this was, and that what you really have done is to take a camera and rob a child of their innocence. and that we needed to send a message. And I'll never forget this guy on the grand jury afterwards saying, why do we need to indict this guy all of these times? And I said, well, because he's hurt this many children. And if the children aren't, you tell me maybe we need to look at the pictures and you tell me which child doesn't deserve their day in court, because I'm not capable as a father of saying, okay, well, 10 of these charges is enough. So we'll just indict on 10 representative cases, because that means every other child that was raped with a camera, that had their innocence taken away, did not get justice. And I simply wouldn't do it. And they indicted on every count for every picture. And it resulted in the longest sentence for child pornography in Alabama history.
How many counts were there?
I don't remember now. It seems like there were close to 100, maybe.
How many years did he get?
I don't remember, Chris, but it was a lot. It was a long sentence, and it should be.
It should be. I like that too, that you indicted on every charge instead of just indicting on 10. That was great. Okay, so 2006 campaign, you run against John Tyson, I believe it was, Mobile District Attorney.
Right.
Okay, start the second term. 2008. Is that when the first, or was it 2009 when the first? I think Governor Riley wanted you to remove some bingo machines, but you said it was you couldn't do that. It
goes back a little more than that. So when I became Attorney General, I had heard my entire career in state government from folks like the Christian Coalition, who opposed gambling on religious grounds, which I don't gamble, didn't gamble then, don't gamble now. But I did take my oath very seriously. And I would hear from them regularly that they wanted to have gambling removed from the state. The problem was that we had amendments to our Constitution that allowed it. And it's a pretty simple concept to understand, I thought. The Constitution in Section 65 says lotteries are illegal. A lottery is a game of chance that you have to pay to play for a chance to win a prize. That includes bingo. So if that's where the story ended, then this would be a really simple legal exercise. The problem is that Alabama is the only state in the country that allows you to amend its constitution for one city or one county. And we had done that 14 or 15 times to allow some form of bingo in a city or in a county. And when you do that, it amends Section 65. It carves out an exception for that jurisdiction. So it wasn't as simple as just saying, well, Alabama doesn't allow lotteries, so this is all illegal. And I tried to explain to people back then who would say, well, why don't we just enforce the law uniformly? Well, we don't enforce the law uniformly on lots of things. That's how we ended up with wet counties and dry counties. There's a lot of times when we enforce it uniformly for a jurisdiction, but we make exceptions. And gambling was one of those exceptions. But I heard what the Christian Coalition was saying. These aren't really bingo machines. So I did what I think to this day I'm still the only elected official to ever do. I went to all the electronic bingo halls myself in person and looked at what was going on. And I became convinced, and you don't want to hear all the story of how, but I became convinced that just like if I sent you an email, it would be the same, it would be the equivalent correspondence to if I had written it on parchment with a quill pen. They both are correspondence. Now, technology has allowed the manner to change, but it hasn't changed what it is. Well, bingo doesn't just have to be played on a piece of slate with buttons covering up numbers anymore. You can play it just like you can play solitaire on your phone. And That was the finding that I made. When I went to the bingo halls, though, I went not to find a way to legalize bingo. I went because my friends in law enforcement were complaining that they were getting criticized for not shutting down bingo or gambling, and they didn't have the resources to go hire computer forensic experts to come in. So we went to find a simple test that you didn't need an expert to apply so that law enforcement could do their job. That was the whole reason that we went. And what we ended up with was a test very similar to the one the Supreme Court would later come up with that said bingo is a game that you play on a 5x5 grid. So if you walk up to a machine and it's got a 10x10 grid, that's not bingo. It's played using the odds of a 75 ball game. So if it's got 100 balls or 20 balls, it's not bingo. You got to have a winner. You play bingo until somebody wins. So if the house ever wins, it's not bingo. If you walk in a room and there's one person playing a machine, it can't be bingo because you can't play against the house. Because if you're playing against the house could win. We issued those findings not to pave the way for bingo or to make it legal, but to provide guidance to law enforcement. Now, everybody's mischaracterized that, but that's what we did.
Okay.
Later, the governor decided that he believed, for whatever reason, if it was electronic, it was illegal. And he would say things like, well, if it looks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's a duck. And these look like slot machines. And I said to him one day, well, Governor, I'll bring a glass of Gatorade and a glass of antifreeze over. They look the same. It is true. You shouldn't have any hesitancy to drink out of one of them. And one day he said, well, no, these are all illegal gambling machines because you put money in them and you hope that you're going to get something of value out of them. And I said, well, why don't you come over here and seize the Coke machine on the 3rd floor of the Attorney General's building? You put money in that and hope that a Coke comes out. Sometimes it does and sometimes it doesn't. It's not as simple as just having a slogan or a jingo that you go enforce. Enforcing the law is a serious business. And I took the oath that I took seriously. And I believe then and I believe now that we were right about the law. And the Supreme Court putting a retired district attorney in charge of the state's legal business instead of the attorney general not only goes against the findings of the Constitutional Convention, it goes against years of precedent. And the fact that they did it does not change my mind that they're wrong. They were wrong then and they're wrong now.
Well, I'm not a jurist. Didn't go to law school. Just my reading on it, I thought you was right. The way it read to me. I mean, I can't get into all the the details like you just did, but but then it looked like, I guess you just touched on then, they took the power out of your hands and gave to the governor.
They did.
I mean, I was like, well, how did, what's the point of having an attorney general then if the governor's going to have as much, he's going to enforce the law? I didn't understand where that came from. So I could understand where that was.
Interestingly, when Alabama's Constitutional Convention met in 1901, this exact issue came up. There was a former governor and a former attorney general who were both delegates. And the former governor made a motion that the attorney general should be appointed by the governor and answer to the governor. And the attorney general said, well, that's a terrible idea. Of all people in government who should be independent, it should be the attorney general. The Constitutional Convention rejected the governor's amendment and made the attorney general independent. There's no question that nobody believed that the governor could take over legal affairs from the attorney general. But I have often wondered if Don Siegelman wished that he had known that he could take the investigation of his administration away from Bill Pryor and be autonomous. That's exactly what the Supreme Court's wrong. That's why the attorney general should serve as a check on the governor and should run the state's legal affairs. But look, that's all in the past. That's all history. That's just my 2 cents worth. I thought they were wrong. think they're wrong now.
Interesting. You mentioned that because I've often I've asked other people this. Do you think Governor Siegelman got a raw deal?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I thought the guy got, what I've seen, and I was like, man, come on, this is too much here. Okay, so 2010. So I'm going to cover all the races in just a second. So I want to go through something else in your career. Gabe Watson.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it was 2010. Was it? You decided to bring charges against him. Did you feel he was guilty and you could win a conviction, or was that help the family?
I didn't think that we had cause to indict him. I met with Tina Thomas's parents. I looked at the evidence of what happened, and I believed that we had probable cause to go to a grand jury and seek a capital indictment, which is what we got. And then Australia refused to honor an extradition warrant, told me that we were barbarians because we believed in capital punishment, and they wouldn't extradite him unless we took the death penalty off the table. And I didn't believe that it was up to the country of Australia to decide how Alabama was going to mete out justice. And I refused to take capital punishment off the table. And I believe that was the right decision.
So the first question I have is about that. Now, me personally, I mean, what I seen, I thought Gabe was an innocent man. Stuff in Australia, or I think, or at least it would have been hard for me to vote guilty. But how did you think that you could get 12 people to agree on a verdict with him?
Well, that's not the test. That would make justice into a popularity contest.
Okay.
The test is, do you believe there's probable cause for the indictment? And look, our system is set up with a jury. It's a check on the prosecutors. But no, I would not ever indict somebody if I didn't believe that we could win a conviction based on the evidence. I'm not in the business of railroading people. I wasn't in the business of wrongfully pursuing people. But it wasn't up to me to make that decision. It would have been up to jurors to make that decision. But I believe that the evidence supported the indictment.
Okay, so how did Alabama have jurisdiction to charge him with that crime that supposedly happened or allegedly happened in Australia?
Well, because it was my belief that the execution of the crime happened in Australia, but the planning and the arranging of the crime happened in Alabama. That's where the tickets were bought. That's where the money was collected. That's where the insurance proceeds were sought. So I believe they were Alabama citizens. I believe Alabama had jurisdiction over the crime because of that. Okay,
so planning the crime in the state is just like committing it elsewhere then. Okay, I follow that.
No, just like committing it elsewhere, but it gives Alabama a sufficient connection to the crime. It's not like a crime of passion that, you go to California and fly into a fit of rage over something and you kill somebody. Alabama might have a hard time with that. But this crime, in my opinion, and look, I respect the justice system. Gabe Watson wasn't convicted. Gabe Watson was found innocent. I'm not in any way trying to undermine that. But the way Alabama had jurisdiction to bring the indictment it was my belief that the crime was planned and the carrying out of the crime started in Alabama.
Well, what do you think the motive was for him?
Well, I don't know. I guess we would have learned more about that.
Okay.
Her parents believed it was financial.
Okay. So during the after the race against Strange, during that years you was in private practice like you are now until 2018.
Yep.
Okay. So let's go back to your career previously. So, 2010, Governor Riley went at you hard. Was Governor Riley because I remember during the Baxley Riley race, was he that sold out to the casino Indians?
I don't know. A lot of people believed that the Choctaw Indians were behind all of that. I don't know. I mean, I never saw any evidence of it. Honestly, I can't tell you what the governor's motivations were. I can only tell you that I don't believe he was right on the law. I don't think that he was right as to what the Constitution requires. And a lot of people were hurt during the course of all of that. And although I have had my position misrepresented that I was somehow justifying breaking the law in order to preserve jobs, I don't really see those two things as mutually exclusive. I believe that the disregard of the law led to people being fired. It was the law that I believe should be vindicated. And, if you vindicated the law, people don't lose their jobs. And Alabama lost a lot, frankly. I think that the facility that was planned down in Dothan would have been, I think it would have been a remarkable tourist attraction had it ever come to fruition. And incidentally, it's also been misrepresented that I went down and endorsed that project, which is just simply not true. It is true that I went down when that project was first being contemplated, but it was not in Houston County where they had a bingo amendment. It was in Coffee County, which is my home county, where there is no bingo amendment. There was no bingo involved. They, at that time, were going to build a Branson type entertainment district, and it was going to be surrounded by a neighborhood that would be a mix of celebrities and regular people living there. And Mike Ditka was going to put a steakhouse there, and it would have been quite a remarkable thing. The problem was that in between when I was down there and when it ultimately moved to Houston County, the real estate market fell apart. And there was no way to make the economics of it work without a different driver. And Ronnie Gilly chose bingo as the avenue for that. And I believe that the law is that he was exactly within his rights to play electronic bingo in Houston County. I believed it then, and I believe it now. That's the law. And the fact that you don't like the law doesn't make it not the law.
So how does somebody, and this might be a tough question to answer because I've often wondered this myself, how does somebody accumulate that kind of power, political power, that they can go after somebody at, a primary and just destroy them? I mean, I've never understood how Riley or really anybody could accumulate.
Well, the state was a very different place 11 years ago. I would say that, the Indians were not really, that the Porch Indians were not really that powerful of a political force yet. The Republican Party was, in large part, opposed to gaming. I just didn't see that I had the luxury of playing to what the party wanted. I didn't take an oath to the Republican Party or to the Alabama Baptist. I took an oath to the Constitution of Alabama that I would fairly enforce the law. And look, if I teach my kids that anybody can do what's right when it's easy. Anybody can do what's right when there's no consequences. What matters is, what will you do when it costs you something? Will you pay the price to do what's right or not? I had young kids at home then. There was no way that I was going to step on the biggest stage and in front of my children be a hypocrite. In front of my children, not do what I told them. So, whether there were political consequences or electoral consequences, I gave up the right to really take that into consideration when I raised my hand and put my hand on the Bible and said, I will enforce the Constitution of Alabama. So help me God. Not if I can win elections, not if it's popular, not if everybody likes it, Not if the governor approves of it. Always. You know what the only thing Bob Riley asked me when he appointed me was?
What's that?
He said, the only criteria that I have for this job is I want to know that you will always follow the law, no matter what. So not only I take a note to the Constitution, I made a promise to the man that later wanted me to go against that promise in my mind. And I just simply wasn't going to do it. And frankly, if I had it to do over again, I'd lose the election all over again. It's just not worth it.
Yeah, I got to respect that. So, because, 2008, 2009, before what's going on, I was thinking, when I was talking to friends, that's going to be your next governor. Did you ever have those thoughts? Hey, I'm going to run for governor in 2010, or I'll run for governor one day, or
no, look, I love state government, and I love the ability to change things in a positive way and to make a difference. And if had I had the opportunity to do that as governor, I think there's a lot of good things that could have been done. But I don't have any regrets. I did what I thought I was required to do. And the one guy that it really matters to me looks out at me from my mirror and tells me that I did what was right. And that really is all that matters. My kids are proud of me. My kids understand what happened. My parents understood. Both my parents have died since then, but I don't believe my dad was ever prouder of me than he was the night I lost that election, because he knew why I lost. And frankly, if the price of holding political office is to sell out your convictions and betray your oath, it's just not a price I'm going to pay.
You got to respect that there. So in 2018, you come back out and you run for attorney general again, which kind of surprised me, because when I seen your name on the ballot, what made you decide to jump back in that race? I mean, you've been out for 8 years. The itch, or
a lot of things. One, I didn't like a lot of things that were going on in the attorney general's office. We had just been through a terrible episode with the governor. I believe we had corruption in the highest offices in the state. And I've always felt a calling to serve my state. And it was an opportunity at a time that I believed Alabama needed somebody that was willing to step forward, that didn't need a job, that wasn't doing it because they thought they needed their name in the newspaper. I'd done all that. I did it because I care about Alabama, and I didn't like the direction that Alabama was going. And so I put my life on hold again and stepped back in the arena, and don't regret that. I don't really regret any political decisions that I've made. I was glad to do it. I was honored that so many old friends came back and remembered me and stood by me. I was proud to have a lot of new friends. And I never really feel as alive as when I get to go out and just be with the people of Alabama. They're remarkable.
I met you in Baltimore County last year, February or something like that. I was pretty impressed because out of all the people that was running for that district, you were the only one that spoke to me and shook my hand out of Moore and all those guys' names. But that race right there, I'm looking at people are in it, and then I'm looking at 2006 in the general election. You carried 82% of the vote passing. 2010, you lost 60% to 40 Strange. In that district, I think you won by 10 points, 55-45. In the primary against with all of them, you carried almost half the vote. What do you think happened there? I mean, I thought it was going to be an easy win. I was surprised when.
Well, there's a lot of things that went on. I got in that race, frankly, because it offended my sensibilities to have a guy who thought he could buy a seat in Congress and buy it using money that he stole from military families when he was moving them. And I just found that to be the height of hypocrisy. And I thought, if you would steal this amount of money when you're not in government, what on earth would you do if you were inside government? And I guess every time I've been in politics, I've been in it because of just an innate sense of fairness. I didn't grow up with money. I didn't grow up around power and politics. I just had some profound things that happened to me that influenced the whole trajectory of my life. And I've always been for the underdog. I've always been for the working guy. And I think people know that. And that's why I ran for Congress. And, I look at the race, and somebody had to be willing to step up and be willing to do the hard work of making sure people were making informed decisions when they cast their ballots. And, nobody else was doing it. And I don't apologize for doing it. I thought it was important that people understand the state.
Did y'all have? Oh, I'm sorry. Did y'all have any pre-election polls? Leading into that, because I know that had to be surprising. Because to run that strong in every race, and then I just, I was shocked when you did win that. And I just wonder if your pre-election polls showed that, or
we didn't do
taken back.
I've never really been a big advocate of polling. It has its place, but I've always sort of trusted my instincts that if you're out with the people enough, you don't need a poll to tell you what people think.
How did you feel going in election night?
Well, we knew that. We knew it was going to be hard. There were 5 people in the race. We knew that we had to be the ones to deliver the hard message about somebody else, and you always run the risk if you deliver a hard message that people are going to hear the message, but they're not going to like the person delivering it. And we had been, my mom had been on TV with me. We had, I think, the best TV commercial I've ever had, with me and my mom sitting around talking about politics.
I seen that one.
But, at some point, somebody had to be willing to educate the voters. And we knew that was a risk, that if we did that, we would probably suffer collateral damage, because people don't like negative campaigning. And negative commercials work, but people don't like it. So, it is what it is. It is what it is. We did what we set out to do. And frankly, then my mom got really sick right after that, and I can't really think of anything that would have. God looks after children and fools and drunks. And I don't drink, and I'm too old to be a child. But had I won that race, I would have been headed to Washington, D.C. at the same time that my mom got a devastating cancer diagnosis. And she only lived 3 weeks. And I wouldn't trade the 3 weeks I spent with my mom for all the power, all the fame, all the money in the world. So in addition to understanding the mechanics of what happened, in some ways, I just believe that it was God making sure I had time with my mom. And I'm forever grateful that I didn't win that race.
That's a pretty heartwarming story right there. I'm glad you got to spend that time with your mother too. So are we going to see Troy King run for office again?
I'm not planning to run for office. I like what I'm doing. I like what I'm doing just fine. I continue to support people that I think are good people that I'd like to see in office, because I've always believed that the worst thing that can happen is for the good people to throw up their hands and say, I'm just not willing to wallow in the dirty politics that campaigning can become. And as I used to tell my wife, who wants to be governed by the people that don't care about that? So good people have to step up. Good people have to be willing to run, and good people have to be willing to do the right thing. My dad used to tell me that you never do right by doing wrong. And that's pretty good advice for anybody, well, in any job, but particularly in politics, that it's not true that the ends always justify the means. We do have to be principled people, and it does matter how we do the things that we do. And is it harder to do things the right way than it is to cheat and lie and steal? Well, of course it is. But if it's worth doing, it's worth doing right. And I pray every day that God will raise up new leaders who understand that and who want to serve the state, who understand that public service is about the public and about serving, and will go into this for the right reasons and will make the right decisions for our state. These are really scary times, and we need good men and women to step forward now more than we've ever needed them before.
Got a couple more quick questions for you. I'm looking at this last legislative session, and I mean, I don't get it. You've got a Republican governor, a Republican lieutenant governor. They control both houses, and they passed a transgender bill. Which, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to transgender, but they passed that, and they passed. They really didn't pass anything. I mean, how do they not get anything out of passed with controlling everything?
I don't know. A lot of people would say that the less they do, the better off we are. I don't know. I mean, it's just the nature of politics that everybody has high hopes. Everybody believes that we're going to agree on a certain group of fundamental things, and you get into the process, and it's true that you don't want to watch laws being made any more than you want to watch your sausage being made. It is a messy, messy process. And, hopefully at the end of the day, more good than bad gets done. I have a lot of friends in the legislature, and I know that they are there for the right reasons, and I know that they're there trying to make a difference and do what's right, but it's hard. Those jobs are hard.
I've seen the last 2 or 3 years, the lottery bill fell, and I think Alabamians should have the right to vote on it. I'm kind of glad we don't have it. That way I wouldn't be stopping at a scratch off or a gas station every 5 minutes and buying a scratch off. But it seems like they have that bill set up every year where 90% of the money's they're going to have their hands in it, and 10% is going to education. And then I seen the marijuana bill. I mean, the way they had that thing so stripped down, it was like, well, what's the point of even passing this?
Well, I saw it when I ran for Congress. I went to Washington, and I did not meet with a single lobbyist in Washington, D.C. who said to me, I'd like to help you if you will agree that you're going to put the country first, or you're going to let your conscience be your guide, or you're going to do what's right, or you're going to make calls based on your value set. Every single person I met with was, well, I want to know, will you support giving money to this person? Will you support giving money to that person? Will you support this special interest agenda? That's what's wrong with politics, is everybody is at the trough, and everybody wants something. And very few people want what's best for the state. And, but it is what it is. And the problems with gambling are way longer. I mean, they've been going on since at least the early 90s that we've been dealing with these problems. It's nothing new.
Oh, yeah. I remember when Governor Siegelman first proposed it in 1990 when he ran for governor. I was kind of surprised that they'd went this far with the marijuana, though. I thought that'd be a last ditch effort that I did something like that. I remember I'd seen something federally where the federal government had talked about doing it up under Trump, but I don't think that anything ever came of that. Let's see. The state of affairs right now with Governor Ivey. She just said she was going to run for governor again. I mean, she's 75 years old.
Well, it's hard to argue, though, with the stability that she's brought. She stabilized the state at a time when it desperately needed a steady hand on the ship of state. You can quibble about things like the gas tax and whether that was a good idea or not. But there's not a lot of criticism that you hear about decisions that Governor Ivey has made. I think she's been good for the state.
I have to agree with you. A friend of mine was talking about it today, and I said, I like her. Yeah, I can't find anything to dislike about her. I mean,
I've known her a long time. She ran for the first time in 2002. I ran for Secretary of State, and she ran for Treasurer, and I got to know her on the campaign trail, and we don't see each other very often, but we've been friends ever since. And I hear the criticisms and I listen to people, but the bottom line is that it's really been a long time since Alabama's had really a boring state government. There's no scandals, there's no people resigning, and you don't see that. And I think that's a credit to Governor Ivey.
Yeah, because in just a few years' time there, we had the head of our legislature go down, had the judicial and the governor go down.
I got in trouble. I was on a national news program, and I said most governments in America have three branches. We have three rings, and it was a really difficult time. You didn't want to tell people you were from Alabama because of just everything that was going on. I mean, regardless of what you thought about the different people involved, it just was a circus. And it didn't do Alabama's image any good, and I'm glad we're not dealing with that anymore.
I can't, I'm not going to call the names, but a certain member who the legislature thinks going to trial, and he went to hire a defense attorney in Birmingham, and his words to him was it's just to the effect of, it's just like you Republicans, every time you get in trouble, you get a damn Democrat to get you out of
it. I've heard some of my Democrat friends say that. They think
he told me
that. I've enjoyed visiting with you.
Hey man, this has been great. Thanks. I'm sorry for taking up so much of your time. When I get this thing edited, I'll send you a copy of it, and
I'll look forward to it.
I'm going to break them down into some segments too. And I'll send you the link of that podcast I was on if you want to listen to that about Governor Wallace. But thanks a lot for this hour. I'm sorry for taking up all your time, but I really appreciate it.
Had a ball.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, Chris.